Right, good morning ladies and gentlemen. The purpose of this lesson today is to show you how New Era uses QR codes in their books. And as part of our training today, I'm going to work on the calculations. A lot of learners cannot work out when amounts have to increase or decrease. And so, as a quick revision of what I'm going to do in the lesson, I'm just going to explain to you so that you can go back and take this to your learners. The important thing before we get started is that we have to have a starting point. And we have taken 100 as our starting point. You've got to start somewhere, and naught is actually just nothing. So we start at 100 all the time. Now you would have already covered this when you did cost of sales on exactly the same principle. And now to demonstrate, first of all, I'm going to look at VAT. Now our starting point is 100. So the exclusive amount, the amount without VAT in it, is 100%. The VAT, the new VAT rate in South Africa is now 15%. And so the inclusive is the two added together is 115%. Now learners need to understand that first of all. Then, using that, they can then calculate the missing figures. So if you look here, I've got a table here where I've given you the exclusive amount of 52,600. Now, at this point, that is the exclusive. And exclusive is equal to 100%. So we're going to divide it by 100. We divide by what we're given. And we're given the exclusive amount. We times it by what do we want. Now, in this case, I want both of these. So I could do either one of these calculations first. For ease, let's go with the inclusive to start with. So I want to find the inclusive. Now the inclusive is 115%. So I'm going to times by 115. Now both the 100 and the 115 have got percentages on. So I've just ignored the percentage because they'll cancel each other out. So the important thing is we divide by what we know times by what we want. And if you take a calculator and work that out, it'll come to 60,490. So I can go in and fill in 60,490. Now once I've got one figure, the VAT is the difference between the two, so I can just subtract the one from each other and I'll get a figure of 7890. But let's just prove that. If you go back to what we started, 52,600, that was the exclusive, so I'm dividing by 100. But this time I decided to rather work out the VAT amount. So I'm timesing by 15, because VAT is 15. So 52,600 divided by 100 times by 15 on a calculator will give you the same figure of 7890. Right, now let's carry on. The next one, we've been given the inclusive. So remember the principle. We take the amount 106,145. But this time that is the inclusive. And inclusive is equal to 115. So I'm going to divide by 115. And I can either calculate the exclusive or the VAT. Right, let's go with the exclusive. Now exclusive is 100, so times by 100. So on their calculators, 106,145 divide by what you know, 115, times 100, and you'll come out with a figure of 92,300. Similar way as we did before, you could check and find the VAT by timesing by 15, or if this figure is 92,300, the difference will be the VAT amount, 13,845. And they give you the VAT, and everybody gets into a panic and they don't know how to do it. But it follows the same principle. 720 is the figure you've got. But 720 is equal to 15%. This is the VAT amount. This was the 15%. So you're going to divide by 15. Divide by what you know. Times by And again, you can either times by 100 and get the exclusive, or times by the 115 and get the inclusive. So if I was to times by 100, I would get a figure of 4,800. So 4,800, add on the VAT of 720, and I'll have my inclusive amount of 5520. Or you could have times this by 115 and you would have got the amount straight away. Now VAT will always involve calculations. Now this formula that we're using over here of starting at 100 and working from there is absolutely essential in all calculations. And although I'm not doing cost of sales here, I'm sure you're all aware that the cost of sales works on exactly the same. Right, now I want to use another example. Came out of the paper from last year. The adjustment was that the audit fees of 65,400 had been paid. But then they told you that 75% had only been paid. So while you've paid 65,400, that was equal to only 75% of the amount. So the total amount of audit fees is going to be 100%, because that's what you've got to pay. We have actually paid 75%. So therefore, owing is still 25%. Now, because every figure's got a percentage on, they cancel each other out, I'm ignoring it. So now, we've been given a figure of 65,400. That is equal to the paid amount. That is equal to 75%. So we're going to divide by 75. Times by, and you can either times by 100 and get the full audit fees, or you could have times by 25 and found out what the audit fees are that are owing. So in this particular case, it came out to an amount of 87,200. Now that is the full amount. That is the total amount. They have paid 65,400, which was 75%, and so therefore the amount that's still owing is 21,800. So the adjustment would be 65,400 plus 21,800, which is an accrued expense, to give you the total figure that the audit fees amount to. You could have, as I said, have divided this by 75 times 15 and found the amount that is owing and then added on to get the full amount. Now, another adjustment they gave you last year was that the rent was originally 11,200. But then on the 1st of December, the rent actually increased by 7.5%. So it was 100%. Remember, we started 100, and then it went up to 107.5%. So we need to work out the increase in order to get the total rent for the year. Now, we were told also that rent had actually been paid 2 months in advance. So it had been paid for March and April. So all in all, 14 months rent had been paid in this exercise. So now, the easiest way would be to work out the fact that from the 1st of March till the 1st of December will be 9 months. The rent was 100%. December, January, February, 3 months would be 107.5%. Now we do know that the original rent was 11,200. So we're going to have 9 months. Let's put it like this: 9 months times 11,200. And then we're going to have 3 months times 11,200. Now that is equal to 100%, because remember that was the original. There it was the original. And the rent increased now to 107.5%. So you're going to work out, first of all, inside the brackets, and we're going to find out what the increased rent was, and then from there, multiply by 3. Now, that means that 9 months, 11 times 200, the rent that had to be paid was 100,800. The rent here, it's increased by 107.5%. So you're going to take the 11,200, divide by 100 times 107, and you get the increased rent. And 3 months to make up the year. And so the total rent for this year is 136,920. Anything over and above that would be prepaid. Now, as they originally told us that 2 months had been prepaid, 2 months times the new amount, because remember it was after the increase, is the prepaid amount. Now my focus here is on these calculations, these percentages. So just going back to reinforce, rent was 100, it then increased by 107. So for 9 months we had 100%, and for 3 months it was 107.5. As the rent figure was more in this particular adjustment, the extra 2 months were prepaid. Right, so let's look at another example concerning rent. Now, rent adjustment happens a lot in the matric exam, so we need to get familiar with it. You're told that rent was, in the pre-adjustment trial balance, was 202,500. But this time, you're not told what the amount was per month. All you're told is that, again, similar to the previous one, 14 months have been paid because they've paid till the end of April. But the important thing is that on the 1st of December, the rent increased by 1,200. So again, we know that a total of 14 months rent has been paid, and that is equal to 202,500. But 2 months of this figure at the increase belongs to next year. So we have to minus it. And now we've got to find out what those 2 months are. So again, our starting point is we're going to start with 100. And 100 something. So let's just call it X's, because stick to what the maths people do. So there were 100 X's, 100 rands, 100 apples. That was your rent. Then your rent increase is still the same amount, but it went up by 1,200. So if we make a math sum here now, we're going to have 9 months, because from the 1st of March to the 1st of December, there was 9 months, was at 100 X's. So that's a total of 900 X's. Then for the next 3 months, plus the 2 extra months, was 5 months. And the rent here was still the same basis, still 100x, but it went up by 1,200. So multiply that brackets out, 500 x's plus 6,000. Now this 6,000 is the extra. It's 1,200 times 5. So first step, let's get rid of that, because we've got a common base here and a common base here. Let's get rid of this extra. So if we solve the sum, we got 900 x's plus 500 x's plus the 6,000 is equal to that. So move the 6,000 over, get rid of the increase. Let's go back to what the rent was originally. And so we come out with 1,400 x's. Remember, there was 9 months plus an extra 5. There's been too many months paid. Take the 6,000 over, and we minus the 6,000, and that gives me a sum of 1,400 x's is equal to 196,000. Now let's solve for x. And so that 196,000 is equal to 1,400 x's. So again, from maths, you know, you divide both sides by 1,400 and you solve for x. X is equal to 140. But now that means that originally the rent was 100 x's. So it was 100 times 140. The rent then increased to 100 x's plus 1,200. So we want to take out these two amounts over here. So 100 x's plus 1,200. And so we need to say, right, we're going to have 140 times 100 plus 1,200. Because just one x is equal to 14, or 140. So that means the rent originally was, if 140 times 100, the rent was originally 14,000. That's what the rent was. It then increased by 1,200, and so the extra month's rent is 15,200. So just going over that, important first of all to get your number of months, and because we got 2 extra months, is 14 months altogether, and they've paid 202,000. So 2 months have to be taken away. So we started 100. Always our starting point 100. So there was 100 x's or 100 rands, but not 100 rand. 100 times the number of rands, right? Then it went up by 1,200. So for 14 months, or for 9 months, it was 100. It was at the original base. Then the next 5 months, still that same 100, but it went up by 1,200 a month. So let's get rid of that 6,000, the extra, the 5 months, December, January, February, March, April. The extra was 1,200. So we get rid of that and we get 196,000. Now that was equal to the 14 months rent at the original base. So we solve for x and we work out that the rent was originally 14,000. It then went up by 1,200, so it went to 15,200. So now let's look at another example. I've given you the rent has been paid for 203,000, and again March and April. So we still got 14 months rent. But this time, instead of saying it increased by 1,200, it says it increased by 10%. Same principle. We start at 100. But now there's an unknown here, so I'm using the unknown, 100 apples. It then went up by 10%, so it gone up to 110 x's. So, of the 14, 9 months, there was 100 x's, plus then 5 times 110 x's. It's gone up by 10%, equals the 203,200. So again, we've got 14, we've got 900 x's, sorry, my apologies, 900 x's plus 550 x's equals 203, and you solve for x. So 900 x's plus 550 x's, because remember it went up by 10%, so you got 1450 equal to that. Solve for x, so by dividing by 1450, and so x is equal to 140. But that's not the end, that's just what x is equal to. The rent originally was 100 x's, so 100 times 140, and after the increase, the prepaid amounts that we've got to subtract is going to be 110 x's, so 110 times 140, and your rent is 15,400 per month. 2 months of it prepaid. Now these type of calculations come in every exam, so you need to concentrate, you need to focus on them, you need to do example after example. Although there's a slight variation in them, at the end of the day each one of these started with 100, and then you build on from there. So good luck, and let's keep practicing some of these so that you can handle them in the exams easier.